Hello guys and girls, Bored now back with you, and on this video I'm gonna take a rare break from all the horror movie watching and reviewing of the month of October, and I'm gonna return to television and to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, my ongoing review of the whole show. So this is season 2, episode 2, and it is called Some Assembly Required. So this is one of the more sort of random one-off Monster of the Week style episodes, and it's the one where they bizarrely, they basically cross weird science with a Frankenstein style plot, all set in a high school. So you get these two science nerds who are essentially trying to put together the perfect woman. So they're creepily grave robbing, taking bodies, and so they're getting all different female body parts, and they start targeting girls in Sunnydale High, and they pick out Cordelia in particular. So once again, she feels like a bit of a damsel in this episode, and they target her, to sort of complete this weird science type experiment, create the perfect woman. And it turns out later on, then, they are also raising Daryl, who's a former popular football player at Sunnydale High who died tragically, I think on the field of play, if I remember correctly. But it sort of goes into his backstory, but they rise him from the dead at one point, and he used to have a thing with Cordelia, so that's kind of partly why they've chosen Cordelia for this. So she becomes essentially the one who's in danger and the whole experiment. And you get one of the nerds who's kind of the more creepy, sleazy type one, the one who, pervs on the girls and is kind of more into it. And then you get the one who's meant to be the more sensitive one, the one who's hesitant about going through with such a creepy experiment, but peer pressure, whatever it is, pushed into it. So that's basically the plot. And it's a good example of a season 2 episode which feels like season 1, because even though the show really comes into its own in season 2 and we really get the Buffy which we now know and love, it still takes a while. There are still some rough episodes, and this is definitely one of them. This does feel like a very disposable Monster of the Week style episode, and the idea, just never works for me. The sort of characters they introduce, the science nerds, they don't feel very interesting, and it feels like a very rough around the edges, very cheesy, not very interesting Monster of the Week style plot. So really that's the problem with it. It is, the main plot and the kind of villains, if you like, of the piece. The other stuff with the Scoobies, as always, is perfectly fine, perfectly watchable, and that's why the episode doesn't totally suck, because you have their interactions and stuff. So I'll talk about some of their stuff first, to just point out then, once again, there is good stuff in the episode. One thing I will say is then the episode opens with, the kind of dramatic voiceover and the shot of the grave where it says, "In every generation," that whole speech. But this is the first time we've had it this season, and the difference is then it's actually Anthony Stewart Head who delivers the voiceover, not the sort of generic voiceover guy they had in the first season. And it's actually much improved with Anthony Stewart Head doing it. His delivery is much, much better. He gives it a much more important sort of feel, much more Shakespearean style delivery almost. So I really like that change, and they actually keep it for a long time. I think they keep it till very late in this season, which is longer than I remember it being kept around. So as far as the Scoobies go and their interactions and plots, I sort of like then we get some continuity from the previous episode with Buffy and Angel. So they reference Buffy's actions in the first episode of the season, and the whole dance with Xander that gets references. So we get Angel getting a bit jealous, and them chatting about it, and the fact then Buffy tries to reassure him, I don't have feelings for Xander, and obviously Angel has this sort of worry because Xander's always around her, always in her life, sort of thing. But I like that they mention that in the content, and I do like Angel's sort of jealous line when he says, "Dancing with it would be one word for it, making with him might be another," or something. It's a good line anyway. I do like that. But again, it was sort of building their relationship where they're kind of repairing it after the summer off, and essentially they are sort of dating, but they're taking it quite slowly. And speaking of dating, Giles and Jenny, Giles is working his way up, trying to get the courage to ask out Jenny, which is really adorable. And one of my favourite scenes of the episode is him talking to himself in the library, trying to get the words together, trying to think how he would say it. And Anthony Stewart Head, once again, is just so brilliant at sending himself up in the scene. When he comes out with these quite cheesy, he's like, "Oh, you idiot," sort of saying. And Xander and Buffy walk in on it, and the way they sort of like use it against Giles is really funny. But it's a cute little scene because Buffy does give Giles really basic, dating advice, how to ask her out, but really logical advice. It really, just go for it. Do you like Mexican food? Or she mentions the cinema. So it's a nice little scene because on the one hand they are mocking him, which is funny, but Buffy, I think, is also giving him, sound advice as well. And it's this sort of thing which maybe is a bit of a cliche with, TV shows and that and movies sometimes. But when he actually comes to asking Jenny out, it's this sort of thing where he's about to pop the question and the bell rings for class. So she has to go and teach, and he doesn't get round to doing it, and he sort of says, I want to ask you something, and then she comes back and before going in and says, if it's important, why don't you ask me this weekend at the game, because there's a big football game at that weekend. So it's kind of that TV thing where he gets to go out on a date with her anyway without even sort of asking, but it works well enough because she clearly likes him. So, and then he pretends, oh, of course I was going to go to the game, I wouldn't miss it, whereas he had no intention of going. But so they do have their first date, and it's all quite cute and funny because Willow and Xander show up later on because they're there because of the whole Monster of the Week plot, and they sit in front of Charles and Jenny, and they take, I think they got popcorn and stuff, so it's all really cute, funny stuff. What isn't so cute and funny is that we do see the frustrating side of Xander in this episode. We see just how he can put his foot in his mouth. I mean, I said in season 1 with the finale, then he does have these moments, but then often he'll redeem himself and do something great. But we do really see the bad side of Xander, the immature side, in this episode. So they're talking about the whole sort of thing with Daryl and the whole the sort of kind of love plot, you know, this idea about, well, whatever, but Buffy's just obviously being really critical of you know, this experiment and doing this. And Xander chips in and he says, but people always want the unattainable rather than just realizing what's there in front of them. They just go, yeah. So that's, and he's clearly referencing Buffy and Angel, the fact that Buffy, you know, wants Angel but doesn't go for Xander, if you like. He doesn't notice Xander fancies her and is right there and is attainable, and she's going for what he says is unattainable. And it's this really clunky line. It's just really obnoxious because they're not even talking about that. They're talking about the whole Monster of the Week thing, and Xander is very self-involved in the scene, and it's just a cheap shot at Buffy, which is really and you do have these moments with Xander when he comes out with these childish lines, and you just wanna hear him because he is such a charming character and funny at times, but he does have these moments as well. And I think that's one of his worst ever moments, because sometimes when he comes out with a line and it's sort of anti-Angel, there is at least a basis for it. There is actually something where, you know, you can say, well, he's got a point there, even if he is being a bit immature. But on this occasion, they weren't even talking about Angel, so for him just to come out with that and have a dig at Buffy was really, really rude of him. Shame on you, Xander. Shame on you, bro. And he has another not too clever line at the end of the episode, although it's played for comedy, and I guess it is quite funny. But I guess this is his redemption because he actually saves Cordelia later on. You get this really, really sort of like rough, you know, sort of action sequence in the fire where Cordelia is in trouble, and it ends up with Daryl, the guy who rises from the grave, being sort of killed off in the flames, and one of the nerds is basically his brother. It's a really kind of dumb sort of action scene that probably doesn't belong in a show with Buffy, but Xander ends up saving Cordelia. She's on like the hurdy or the stretcher, and he dives on top and, you know, puts them through the flames. And then later on, Willow and Xander are talking about their lives and talking about, you know, why they can't seem to get dates. And Cordelia comes along and she sincerely says, you know, I would like to thank you, Xander, for saving my life. That was really noble of you. And Xander puts it straight back in her face. It's like, do you mind we were talking here? And Cordy's reaction is just her face that she pulls is really funny. And then they go, well, what we were saying about how we can get dates. And it works fine for the joke, but, you know, it is a really jerky line from Xander considering Cordelia was sincerely apologising. But that's a critique of the episode, Xander's lines, and also just them using Cordy as a damsel once again. It's a well they go to one too many times. Another enjoyable bit actually with Giles again is then when they're because Buffy and Angel has noticed and there's been bodies like nicked from the grave, and Giles like momentarily gets excited over grave robbing. Yeah, he sort of has, oh, grave robbing, interesting, and he smiles, and Buffy says something like, oh, I know you meant to say gross and disgusting, right? And then Giles quickly readjusts. He's like, yeah, yes, nasty little business, must put a stop to it. But I love those little moments with the macabre humour of Giles, you know, him enjoying, you know, just investigating. So yeah, great character stuff. But yeah, the strong stuff is with the Scoobies in the episode. The Monster of the Week plot, it is really lame. the supporting characters aren't very interesting. You get some really, really cheesy action scenes, or the end, as I said, feels like an action scene, and it's one of those where it does. I think what they do well later in this season is the Monster of the Week episodes, although they are standalone, they do actually add to the characters and they add to the arcs, and it's a one-off story. But I think quite often, I mean, it's late in the season, but I Only Have Eyes for You is a good example of this, where it's actually a really good monster of the. I mean, it's not really a monster of the week, but it's a good standalone episode. But at the same time, it comes back to themes of the season. It comes back to stuff that has happened to the characters, and it involves them emotionally rather than it just being a one-off, plot sort of thing. It actually does have some impact on them outside of them just investigating it. So it's something the show gets better at, whereas this just feels like a standalone random monster of the week plot, and not a very interesting one. And then around that you get some pretty good comedy and interactions with the Scoobies. So yeah, this is definitely on the weaker end. It's one of the weaker season 2 episodes, and it's one, as I said, it does feel a bit left over from season 1. So that's it really, not much to talk about. I'll rate the episode, and as I said, definitely on the lower end. It's not terrible, it's not one of the very worst episodes, but it's definitely on the lower end. I would expect it to come quite low when I've done all the episodes. I'll give it 4 out of 10. Overall, really not very good. So as for rankings, I'll just the rankings in the description, in the comments below the description part. I mean, actually thinking about it, I think iRobot You Jane will go up. I think actually that's an episode. Thinking about, I think there is more enjoyment out of that than maybe I gave it credit for, even though there's so much bad. But I would certainly put it above this. I would rewatch that episode more than I would rewatch this. I think there's more enjoyment to be had in it. So this is going near the bottom. This is second bottom for me now. I would keep Teacher's Pet at the bottom, but this goes in. What are we on now? I've done, I think, 14. So this goes in at number 13, second bottom. So some assembly required, pretty forgettable. But we're back to the good stuff next episode, and a certain debut of a certain vampire who goes on to be one of the show's great characters, and he makes one hell of an impact in his first appearance. I won't spoil it, you've probably guessed who it is, but he debuts the next episode, which is When She Was Bad, so something to look forward to next time. This has been my review of Buffy Season 2, Episode 2, Some Assembly Required, and I'll just remind you, there's like a playlist for Season 1 on the channel with all the episodes in order. And obviously I'll start a season 2 playlist now, and you can comment on the episode. What did you think about it? Where would you place it from the episode so far? And any comments you have, like and subscribe if you're new to the channel and you like what I do and you would like more content. But thank you for listening. See you guys soon. Goodbye.